When trying to settle on a topic, I thought of the number of people I'd met whose musical experiences had been limited by anxiety, myself included. My hope is that through further discussion, those of us who tremble at the thought of making music in front of others can find the joy in it once again. So, what is MPA? MPA is short for Music Performance Anxiety. According to Psychology for Musicians and most articles discussing the topic, it's a form of anxiety which many consider also a form of social phobia, caused by the idea of performing in a public setting. Physiological symptoms include accelerated heart rate, sweaty palms, shortness of breath, and blurred vision. Trembling can interfere with fine motor skills involved in playing instruments such as the flute or piano, while shortness of breath might hinder that kind of breathing required for proper singing technique. There are also psychological symptoms, such as negative self-talk about one's expressivity, the possibility for making mistakes and looking foolish, self-doubt, and low self-efficacy, the belief that one has the ability to perform the task at hand. Surveys conducted in Spain and the US revealed that 21.7% of students ages 9 to 13 score high in trait MPA, a general form of this anxiety. 55% of junior high and high school age students report having experienced MPA at some point. 59% of professional orchestra musicians claim to suffer from MPA. It is important to note that there is no one source of anxiety, and that not all forms of anxiety have adverse effects. Bath and Penabianco conducted a study centered around perfectionism and the part it plays in MPA. Through this study, as well as Psychology for Musicians, we learned that the negative outcomes of MPA are due to maladaptive anxiety and perfectionist concerns. These can lead to low self-esteem, catastrophizing, and depression. However, positive outcomes are possible through adaptive anxiety and perfectionist strivings. These can result in characteristics like endurance and positive attitude, and can be considered optimal arousal that provides conditions for high-quality performances. While many among us may embark on this journey of providing children with a music education with the best of intentions, we may unknowingly be causing distress in these young musicians, distress that they ultimately internalize and carry with them into adulthood. With that in mind, the purpose of this research is to understand the roles of parents, teachers, and learners themselves in either aggravating or hopefully alleviating MPA. To start, let's look at the role parents can play in MPA. Yuri Bronfenbrenner, an American psychologist, used his bioecological theory to explain the context of development. A child's most immediate environment is described as their microsystem. This includes family, peers, and school. Of those three, however, it is family that is considered the most influential in determining how children will respond to the world around them. These early experiences in the family context are usually a child's first in communication, motivation, and handling criticism, all of which have big roles in music making. Several studies have found a significant correlation between parenting styles and generalized anxiety and perfectionist tendencies, for better or worse. When children grow up in a home environment of non-approval or inconsistent approval, or perhaps even one of constant criticism, they have a tendency to develop maladaptive perfectionism. We described this in an earlier slide as perfectionist concerns as opposed to its adaptive counterpart, perfectionist strivings. In cases like these, perfectionism becomes a way of securing love and approval. This study conducted by Botha and Penabianco also revealed that there is a gender correlation to consider. It seems that perfectionism in students who identify as female was highly associated with perfectionist mothers, while perfectionism in students who identify as male was associated in the same way with fathers. In the same way family can be a source of anxiety or stress, it can also be a great source of strength and support in helping children grow into adults who can benefit from the positive outcomes of adaptive anxiety and perfectionist strivings. Let's start with Albert Bandura. Albert Bandura's social cognitive theory of observational learning posits that learning can occur through observation. So, What does this mean for parents who want to avoid or ease feelings of MPA in their children? Well, parents can start by modeling, which is implementing coping strategies themselves so their children can see these strategies being used. Strategies can include deep breathing and cognitive restructuring. Cognitive restructuring is the process of substituting counterproductive thoughts like, I can't do this, I'm not good at this, I'm gonna mess up, with task-focused thoughts like, I just need to listen for cues, if I keep my posture, I'll do fine. One more way parents can ease the feelings of MPA is through performance practice. By simply giving their children a supportive space in which to practice performing, they're helping their young musicians cope with the situational stress of performing in front of people. We can also look to parenting practices when attempting to provide a supportive environment for children. Parenting practices, also known as parenting styles, are patterns of discipline and affection parents display with their children. There are 4 distinct types of parenting practices: authoritative, authoritarian, permissive, and uninvolved. Of the 4, authoritative parenting practices have been consistently linked to positive outcomes. This parenting style is characterized by high levels of control, but more importantly, high levels of responsiveness in the form of flexibility. This means understanding when a child needs to be motivated and when they're overwhelmed and simply need space to decompress. The next role we'll consider is that of the teacher. How can the decisions we make contribute to MPA, and how can they ease MPA in our students? Boyette explains that selecting repertoire significantly above a student's skill level can lead to feelings of inadequacy in the face of unrealistic challenges, diminished self-efficacy, avoidance reaction, and learned helplessness. In the same study, Boyette goes on to explain that poor preparation can be a major contributing factor to MPA, and sometimes poor preparation on the part of the student can be a result of poor preparation on the part of the teacher. This can mean a misunderstanding of student skill level, a lack of differentiated instruction, unclear practice and/or performance goals, or poorly organized lessons and a misuse of class time. So what can educators do to ensure they're supporting their students through the challenges they face with MPA? We can start by selecting repertoire that serves students. This means it should be appropriate for the age and skill level being taught. Any new techniques introduced should not be out of reach. We should also try to balance a student's musical wants with their needs. And we should try to give students a voice when choosing repertoire. This could result in more time invested in practicing and them feeling better prepared at the time of performance. In regards to preparation, we must be prepared to ease anxiety at each stage of learning described by Derwin and Reese Weber. In the pre-processing stage, when students are learning new concepts, teachers can provide clear instructions, ensure lessons are organized, perhaps warm-ups and sight readings and sectionals complement the repertoire being worked, and they can also allow students to revisit the material through videos and recordings. In the processing stage, when students are trying to retain information, teachers can ease anxiety by teaching effective study and practice skills. This can include encoding repertoire in a more general and meaningful structure, or verbalization, the act of speaking out the process by which students learn music. In the output stage, which in our case means the performance, teachers can ease anxiety by teaching relaxation techniques such as deep breathing and progressive muscle relaxation, as well as performance strategies. The last role we'll consider is that of the learner. According to Seeger, Botha, and Penabianco, and Lehman and others, there are several factors that a learner should consider in terms of their own MPA. These include genetics, early experiences in music, upbringing, work environment, and perceived sense of competition or scrutiny. There are also personality traits such as introversion, neuroticism, and perfectionism that are associated with MPA. These 3 traits have a positive correlation with MPA. Musicians who scored high in these traits tend to experience greater levels of anxiety at the idea of performing in front of a public. That doesn't mean that these are necessarily firm and out of a performer's control. Because MPA is as unique as the person experiencing it, it's important for a learner to first identify what kind of MPA they're experiencing, and then what coping strategies or treatments are going to work best for them. Is it trait MPA, a general form of anxiety, or is it state MPA, situational? Physiological symptoms can be treated over long term using yoga and/or meditation, but they can also be treated in the short term through deep breathing and muscle relaxation exercises right before walking on stage. Although these have been proven beneficial, some performers have turned to medications such as beta blockers to prevent these symptoms from arising. Psychological symptoms of MPA can be treated by setting appropriate goals. These are process-centered goals that focus on immediately attainable things such as good breathing, good posture, intonation, and things of that sort. We can also implement cognitive restructuring, which we mentioned was replacing counterproductive thoughts with task-focused thoughts. So instead of thinking, I'm gonna mess up, I'm not ready, think, I have to listen for the cues and everything will be fine. So what are the practical implications of this research? How does this help us as educators moving forward? The first thing to keep in mind is to be receptive. Learn to identify when you need to push and motivate and when you need to give students space. Provide the necessary tools. These tools include appropriate repertoire and preparation, as well as coping techniques. Also, model the desired behaviors. We don't just want to tell students how to manage MPA, we want to show them. We also need to acknowledge MPA as teachers, as parents, and as learners. No one can find techniques to treat something that they don't think is a problem to begin with. The last thing and the most important thing is to persevere. Try different coping techniques until you find what works for you.